And at that point, you're going to have 4 guys who have had speed all year. Whether you're talking about Harvick, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., you've got to figure either all or a handful of them are going to be going to Homestead. You throw Chase Elliott in there potentially. That's a tough group to beat. However, Chase has shown speed recently, so no time like the present to have momentum. But yeah, I do think he has a chance because I think that he still could potentially win or perform very well in the races that remain. We only go to Martinsville next, and then Texas, so a speedway, and then Phoenix, tracks that, a guy like Elliott hasn't done poorly at before. He could even sneak off a win or a couple of top 3s or something like that and just get through straight on points. So I think he's got a real shot here. I know, Keselowski faded, but I don't know that that's as much as a fade as it just is a result of you've got one race being Talladega in this last round. You just have things that go on that you really are not able to recover from. And so I just like the fact that you have a guy that is needed to be talked about here in NASCAR, and this is good for the sport. I think Chase Elliott hitting a new popularity at this time of the year is a very good thing for NASCAR, especially with some of the bad news that's coming out this week with Comcast no longer being interested in buying a stake in NASCAR and things like that are going on behind the scenes that are really a big deal for the future of this sport. We need the drivers to be the future of this sport as well. A guy like Chase Elliott would be a perfect contender for that role.
So let me ask you, Eric, do you feel like Chase Elliott winning a title would be the best thing for the health of this sport?
Oh my gosh, absolutely I do. Out of the 8 that remain, I think it would be one of the best possible wins that NASCAR could get. NASCAR really is in search of the next young superstar. We've got guys that can do it. We really do in this sport. I think a guy like Ryan Blaney is going to win a lot of races. I think a guy like Kyle Larson is going to win a lot of races. I think Kyle Larson is going to be a champion, honestly, at some point, if not multiple champion. He's just too good. But when you look at the fact that Chevrolet has lost Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt Jr. over the past couple of years, that's a big blow to a brand and a manufacturer on the track. And that ribbon hasn't been picked up, that bow tie, if you want to say, hasn't been picked up by some of the other drivers. You've got a McMurray and a Larson at Ganassi who have done well, and Larson the better of the two. But then when you shift over to RCR, yeah, Austin Dillon has had spots, but I mean, him and Ryan Newman, they're just not lighting the world on fire, right? Then you've got the Hendrick cars, and Jimmy Johnson hasn't won a race in forever. And honestly, Justin, I'm a little disappointed with the traction that William Byron has got. When they announced this lineup last year, I thought, okay, this is a good thing. You've got a 7-time champion in Jimmy Johnson. You've got Chase Elliott, who's a lot of people are excited about. Alex Bowman certainly deserved to take the 88, and then William Byron deserved to take the 24. But I haven't felt the fan traction behind Bowman and Byron. I don't know if you have, but I haven't. So Chase Elliott taking that Chevrolet manufacturer to the next level, especially being that RCR just doesn't have much going on, Ganassi doesn't have much going on outside of Larson, I think this is what this sport needs, and it's definitely what Chevrolet needs.
For sure. I think Chase Elliott's going to be the most popular driver this year. And this round of races actually lines up pretty well for him. When you look at his track history there, he's got 4 top 10 finishes in his last 5 races at both Phoenix and Texas. And if you think back to last year at Martinsville, when he really burst onto the scene after Denny Hamlin wrecked him and they had their dust up after the race, he was leading late in that race. So he's got the potential to also run very well at Martinsville. Martinsville is a little bit more of a crapshoot where you can get caught up in someone else's mess or taken out, as we saw happen to him last year. But he runs all 3 of these tracks well. So unless he has issues, I think that he's going to advance into the championship round. And what we've seen from him with his 3 wins is 3 different racetracks. He's got a road course. He won on the mile at Dover, and now he's got a 1.5 mile win. So not just a guy that is one discipline, one type of track that he's good at. He's been able to win at multiple tracks. And I think where his popularity is, if he gets into that championship race at Homestead, I think it would definitely draw more eyeballs to the TV. The fact that Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s got connections to the Hendrick organization and Chase drove for JRM. The fact that Jeff Gordon's a mentor for Chase Elliott and you see him a lot in his pits and around Chase. I think all those things are good because then you have 2 big fan bases that are kind of behind this young guy. And I think that would be the best thing for the sport in terms of just overall popularity. So we got one more question for you, Eric, as we end this show. We've got some surprises this year in NASCAR. So the big surprise, I think, happening this weekend was the fact that all 4 Stewart-Haas cars are in the round of 8, which seemed crazy to even think about all 4 Stewart-Haas cars even making the playoffs this time last year. But the move in bringing Eric Almirola into the 10 car has jumped their performance to levels that we didn't think were possible, watching Danica behind the wheel of that car for years. So that's quite the feat. But a few other surprises that have taken place. You've got now Jimmy Johnson this year, 32 races in, and even more dating back to last year where he's winless and actually could break his streak of consecutive years with a win. And Joe Gibbs Racing, Eric, only one of their cars in Kyle Busch actually advanced to the round of 8. So of those 3 topics, which one is more surprising to you?
Yeah, this is a good question because I think I'm torn between 2 of them. I'll give you my third place vote first, and that's the fact that Joe Gibbs Racing, if you really, really look at it honestly, I think it sounds good, and it's a good question, and it sounds like it would be a hard thing to believe. But to me, I think Denny Hamlin is overrated. I think Suarez is a non-factor, and I think Eric Jones is coming, but he's not ready yet. And Kyle Busch is by far one of the top drivers in the sport. So still having Kyle Busch be in the playoffs and the other 3 not, honestly doesn't surprise me that much. Jimmy Johnson not winning a race for that long, that's a big surprise. And now I think you're seeing the fallout from that. You're seeing Chad Knaus and Jimmy Johnson, who probably one of the best duos in sports history. I'm not just talking NASCAR. I'm talking like Tom Brady, Bill Belichick type of stuff. That's one of the best duos in sports history. They're not going to be together next year. And I think you're just seeing a team that it is surprising that there's that much downfall right now for them. And Johnson's career isn't over yet. So they need to make some changes, and it surprises me that he hasn't won for that long. But my vote for most surprising is having 4 cars in the top 8 for an owner. That's a big deal. I mean, 50% of the final playoff drivers is huge in a sport where a loose wheel or a missing lug nut or getting caught up in someone else's wreck at Talladega or who knows what. I mean, getting caught up in the wall at the Charlotte Roval because you don't hit the brakes soon enough and 18 cars go into the wall. These types of things happen throughout the playoffs, and yet Stewart-Haas Racing puts 4 cars in. And Justin, you really nailed it when you talked about Eric Almirola because, certainly Clint Boyer has been there before. Kevin Harvick's a past champion. Kurt Busch is a past champion. There was always going to be that chance. But the 10 car, moving on from Danica Patrick and having Eric Almirola come in his first year and perform really, quite frankly, I would say way over above expectations. I think he expected to get into the playoffs. I'm not sure that he expected to get into the top 8. And realistically, he could still be one of the drivers in the Final 4 because he's not showing any drop-off. He's very competitive. To me, I think that's the story that gets my vote. That's a hard thing to do for any team. You look at teams that didn't have any cars in the playoffs, and this team still has 4 out of the last 8. That's a big deal. But Jimmy Johnson needs a win, and he needs a win soon. I don't think he's going to get it this year, but next year he's going to get a couple because you can't keep him down that long. And Joe Gibbs Racing, they've got changes coming, but it won't be in the form of Kyle Busch going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think the fact that Stewart-Haas got 4 cars to advance to the round of 8, that they actually have half the cars left, is just an impressive feat that I didn't see happening before this year started. Like you said, there's so many little things that can happen, and then you throw in the Roval and Talladega. And basically, just plain and simple, Stewart-Haas, Eric, they've had speed literally every time that these cars have taken the track, that they've had one of their cars that have been one of the guys to beat almost every single week, it feels like. Eric Almirola's had multiple opportunities to win races this year, and he finally got the job done at Talladega, but he could have easily won at Dover. If not for a late race caution brought out by Clint Boyer, of all people, his teammate, he could have had a win there and came back and win at Talladega. He had a chance to win the Daytona 500. I think it was Chicagoland. He led a bunch of races and got into some issues with pit road. So they've got so much speed everywhere they go. plate tracks, intermediate tracks, short tracks. Martinsville could be a little bit of the equalizer because Almirola doesn't have the best track history there. But we did see Boyer win the spring race there. Harvick's usually a guy that's in contention there. And Kurt Busch is a pretty darn good short track racer winning at Bristol this summer. So I don't know what the odds are. And again, Chase Elliott's a guy that's got really good track history at these last 3 here in the round of 8. But Eric, I think that Stewart Haas has a pretty good chance of getting maybe 2 or 3 of these guys into the finale at Homestead for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's actually going to be, despite all of the trouble the NASCAR has had, I think these 8 drivers that are still remaining give us some combinations that could be pretty exciting, not only through these next 3 weeks, but then going into Homestead. And I know one thing's for sure, it would not surprise me this year to see the top 4 drivers in the finishing order at Homestead actually be the 4 guys that are racing for the championship. Because if you put a Kyle Busch, a Martin Truex Jr., a Kevin Harvick, and then toss out one of these other names, a Chase Elliott, you have guys that really could run up front and battle for a win with each other all day long. So I think the season is actually going to finish on a high note for the NASCAR series, and that's good because this offseason is going to get a little bit rocky. Justin, as we close out the show, it's also been still rocky for those Penn State Nittany Lions. Again, we're not going to talk a lot of college football because, quite frankly, Eric just doesn't want to talk about it right now. The Nittany Lions struggled once again. They did get the W this week over Indiana, but they looked terrible doing it. But I got to gloat a little bit because after the 2 tough losses to Ohio State and Michigan State, it sure was nice to sit back on the couch and watch those Buckeyes take a big L this past weekend and drop out of the second position in the standings. So, yes, I know that's sour grapes and I'm just being a jerk about it, but bye-bye, Ohio State. I don't think you have a chance to go to the BCS now. Fortunately, Alabama gets all of the first-place votes this week out of the AP poll, followed right closely behind by Clemson and Notre Dame. So, it's still a lot of excitement to go, but Justin, those teams we talked about, like a Georgia with a 1 loss, they've now keep creeping up there with teams like Ohio State losing. So Georgia could still factor into this thing before the year's out. And the other team I follow, the Florida Gators, are back in the top 10 for the first time in what feels like quite a while. So anything else you're looking at? I know the World Series is getting started. It's actually going on right now while we record this, and our Sixers just lost by 1 point tonight to the Detroit Pistons, so the Sixers fall to 2-2, and now the Pistons are one of those teams at 3-0 in the NBA, but early reaction on them, I'm not going to get too terribly excited. Anything you're looking at as we close out the show?
Well, just looking at the college football schedule, and there's some huge games now that's going to happen as the season moves on, and in a few weeks you're going to have Alabama and LSU play. That could potentially be an elimination game for LSU. If they lose, they'll have 2 losses. And now, boy, that Michigan-Ohio State game, it's always a huge game, and it's going to be even bigger because that could be a game that could get one of those teams with 1 loss with a win versus an opponent ranked that high. That could catapult them into the college football playoff. So there's some massive games that are going to happen here in the coming weeks on college football that are going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And again, the NFL schedule is heating up too because you're starting to see teams that losing is becoming a major problem once you get that 4th loss, that 5th loss. And Justin, I don't know if the Browns can take any more overtime games. I mean, my gosh, 4 overtimes out of 7 games. Those Browns, a few different things could have happened and they could be literally like 5-2 or 6-1. I mean, it's just crazy. And they're not even out of it yet in that AFC North division. So there's a lot of crazy stuff still going to happen in the NFL, but that's going to be it for this edition of Talkback. Again, it's episode 222. And I do have to give a little personal message here. I've got a friend who lives down in Panama City Beach, Florida, who is dealing with the devastation of Hurricane Michael. He is fortunate that he didn't lose his entire house, but his community is just ravaged. And so I did want to put out there that if you want to support and help in some way to the communities down there, and he's been calling me and letting me know what's going on, and it just sounds really bad. And so as these things leave the news and you don't hear about them anymore, you need to remember, just like with Katrina and other major storms, communities that have absolutely been devastated, and I mean leveled, not only from